For those of you who were at the dinner with us last night and witnessed Hans's amazing performance on the bottle, sorry, I should say playing the bottle, not on the bottle, it may come as some surprise to you that he is also a fantastic landscape photographer. This is a really weird thing for me this weekend because I've had, a number of my personal heroes here, and I've had the privilege of presenting them and introducing them, and it's just been a weirdly fantastic experience. And Hans's work I have been aware of for maybe a decade or so. I think I probably came very late to the game. I'm sorry, Hans, in terms of that. But I think his photography is graphically very interesting. It's emotional, and it betrays a fantastic and deep understanding of light and the landscape. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say this afternoon. He's going to talk about his recent book, Iceland, well, body of work beyond the book, I presume, is it? Yeah. So can you put your hands together, please, for Hans Strand?
Thanks. Am I on now? Yeah. I think my career was summiting yesterday playing on that bottle. So from now on, it will just go downhill. Make a fiasco with this presentation. No. Anyway, I traveled to Iceland the first time in 1995. And when I did that, I bought a book in a bookstore on Lögaveger in Reykjavik, a book by a German aerial photographer named Klaus Franke. And I was so blown away by his aerials that I decided myself that I have to go back to Iceland and take some aerials. But I thought there must be some kind of mumbo jumbo because the colors were outrageous and the shapes that couldn't be real images. So I thought it was some kind of infrared film or something strange behind this, until I got up in the airplane myself the first time in year 2000. And I was blown away by these fantastic structures and colors that really existed. And from then on, I returned once or twice every year to take aerials, and I also did a lot of work from ground level. And in year 2006, I borrowed a medium format digital camera for the first time, and was blown away again by the incredible quality of the medium format in comparison with my SLR that I had, DSLR I had before. And from then on, I've been using mostly medium format for my work. And what can I say? I've been shooting the most of my aerials from Cessnas, high-winged airplanes. I sit next to the pilot, and we open the window, and I sit like this, and we make a lap over what I find interesting. And sometimes it's like clay pigeon shooting. It's really, you have to be really quick, and at the same time you have to be accurate. So it's quite a challenge. But also a feeling of standing in the end of a conveyor belt, transporting new motifs to continuously like this. And it's extremely intense, extremely fun, really, to really gorge on a lot of things to compose. We love composing. That's why we're taking pictures. I mean, that's our task, to frame the world around us. And here, sitting in an airplane, you have these motives in abundance coming towards you all the time. Whereas when you walk, it takes a while to find something interesting. So that's the interesting part of it, the fun part of it. So after some years, I realized that maybe I should try to make a book from this body of work. And politely, I wrote some letters to famous big publishing companies. I never got an answer back, really depressing. And I got in touch with Tim Parkin, and I published some Iceland pictures on landscape on the website. And one of the comments was, somebody said, why aren't you making a book from this body of work? And I said, well, I've been trying for 5 years, but nobody wants to make a book. And all of a sudden, I got this reply from David Breen at Triple Kite saying, I can make a book with your work. So the problem was solved. Sometimes miracles are happening. Okay, I think we should try to start so we don't run out of time. Where do I point this? Here? Oh. Is it off and on button? Yeah. Okay, right. Very good. Yeah. Well, the earlier explorers, of course, they came from Norway and they landed on the east side of Iceland. And what they found was just enormous amount of ice coming down from the mountains. And probably that's why they named the island Iceland. A more appropriate name would, in my opinion, be Greenland, because the most of Iceland is green. And Greenland is mostly icy, so... Or maybe it was mixed up in...
Can you step to the right a little bit, just stand this one for us, just the light.
Okay, great. Have to be in the good light. This is an aerial shot from Cessna flying over Breiðamerkurjökull on the east coast of Iceland. This will also not only be a slideshow, it will be a lesson in Icelandic language, you know. You have to... I was terrified when I saw these reports of the eruption in Eyjafjallajökull in 2010, when I heard all these fantastic expressions or pronunciations. Yeah, okay. Breiðamerkurjökull. Yeah, we return to this magical beach again. Everybody has his own version of this icy beach, haven't we? And it's almost embarrassing to show just another shot from here, but nevertheless, it's a fantastic place, and you just have to go there. When you go to Iceland, you just have to go there to see these pieces of ice that are first carried out by this little river and then flushed back on the beach, and they shine like pieces of crystal there. And like Jem, I'm also, or Paul, I'm also really fascinated by this kind of melancholic light, this somber feeling. I actually prefer that in comparison to this golden hour thing. I was more in for golden hour shots when in the beginning of my career, but now I really like good gray weather. Here it was more kind of a hallelujah feeling here, but if the elements are nice to, why shouldn't you take a picture? And this was the same evening as the previous shot, actually. And all of a sudden, somebody I was running a workshop, and somebody in the group said, "Wow, the moon is up in the sky!" And I went from there to there and saw the moon. So I took the opportunity of taking a picture of a very romantic landscape in comparison to the other one. The exposure is 1 second here. That's what I got. I never use any neutral density filters. I never use any filters at all, actually. I think the benefit of using digital technique is that you really don't need grad filters. If I need to darken the sky, I take an extra -2 exposure and I blend the pictures in the post-processing. Then I can do it with surgical precision. Whereas if I use a neutral density filter, a grad filter, it will always bleed into some structures that I don't want to darken. So that's the philosophy. I normally don't go to iconic places, but this is one of the ones that I return to frequently, and that's Dyrhólaey on the south coast, because it's such a magical place. It's exposed to all the forces of nature, and the water in front of you goes all the way down to Antarctica. It's nothing there, literally. So it's just the impact of nature is incredible here. Often very strong winds, and you really have to watch your equipment so it doesn't blow off the cliff. And places can be fantastic without being iconic. Like this angle, I've never seen this shot before, and to me it looks like a fantastic place, really. And you never find one single person, because everybody's going out to this tip here to photograph one of Iceland's biggest waterfalls, Háifoss, which is behind here. But I think the angle from inside here is more interesting. And you see the flow of water coming from a little meltwater river here going through under this snow bridge and merges with a bigger river in the background. Again, quite somber light. And this is one of the most fantastic lava fields on Earth. I believe it's one of the biggest ones, actually. It was created during one single eruption starting in June 1783 and lasted until February 84. And it was the eruption of Loki, one of the worst catastrophes that ever, absolutely the worst one that has happened to Iceland since it was populated in the 800s. And I think about 30% of the population perished, and 80% of the livestock died from poisoning from the eruption. And it generated something like 15 cubic kilometers of lava, and it ended up in a lava field which is 65 kilometers long and about 20 kilometers wide. So it's huge. And today the lava is covered with about 40 centimeter thick moss. It's the nicest bed you can find on Earth. You lay down on this moss, it's so nice, soft. Especially nice looking after a rain like this. In sunshine, this is gray, it's really boring. But after a rain, it's really nice. And there is lakes and waterfalls wherever you go on Iceland. It's really water in abundance. And if you're lucky to have a calm day like this, you can also work with reflections. Very simple shot, actually, but I was inspired by the feeling of tranquility here. Again, very moody light, which I like. And again, the problem with green, as we were discussing. But here, I'm starting to understand how green works now after this workshop. Here, the green is the part of the composition. That's why it's not so disturbing. That's why I think this picture works. And if you have seen this green moss on Iceland, you really know that it's almost, fluorescent. It's incredibly green. I've never seen anything like this green moss before. And the orange here is iron oxide coming from the volcanic soil. And here it's Markafljótsgljúfur. It's a canyon which is maybe 20 kilometers long, and it's the river Markafljót, which has dug a canyon through the landscape here, and it's a really brutal place. And standing on a place like this, which I've done, it's quite scary. You work with your own kind of anxiety. You want to take this step almost, right? Quite a scary place, especially if it's windy. And the mountain Hattfell here in the background. And green again. Everything is green in the Fjallabak region. It's in the highlands. And you can imagine why they have these, they believe in elves. You can imagine when the light is dropping, of course you see elves everywhere. Here it's small elves, right? And here it's on the way to Landmannalaugar, which is a famous place in the Central Highlands. It's a place called Domadalur. Most of the people are just going past here, but it's really an interesting lava landscape with bizarre stone formations. There's another really weird sculptures here, more elves. Landmannalaugar is mountains here in the background. I quite often use wide angles. I use 28 on my Hasselblad camera, equal to about 20 millimeters. That's the lens I use the most. I very seldom use telephoto lenses. Here I've come to Landmannalaugar. You come, here's the road coming in, and here's where you park your car and you camp if you want. And then you hike across the lava field. Easy hike, about 25 minutes to get here, and then another 15 minutes to get up in a high lava field. Mountain Blanukur here. Interesting landscape in my opinion. Here's a gem composition, dead center horizon, which I very seldom use. I have the opposite philosophy. I very seldom center the horizon. But here I thought it was the right way to do it because it was a perfect reflection, so it was just illustrating this reflection, and that's why I put everything in the dead center. It's in Landmannalögar, a small town, about an hour hike from the camp place. Here we are in Veiðivötn. It's north of Landmannalögar. It's a wetland lake area, lots of lakes and rivers and wetlands. Tons of flies. There's so many flies that you can't take the pictures sometimes. This one, I put the camera on self-release, about 10 seconds, and then I moved away slowly to attract the flies while the camera took the picture. Otherwise, it would just have been black. They're in your nostrils and in your eyes, and they don't bite you, but they're very irritating. I think these are called angelicus. It's a medicinal plant. Still in Veiðivötn, evening light. Here is a mountain called Einhyrningur, which means unicorn, because of this. You can make similarities with a unicorn here. I was driving down from the highlands. The road comes here, and I saw the light coming, so I just ran out of the car, and in panic I just found something to put in foreground in relation to the mountain itself. I don't know if it was that smart, but that's the way I did it. The mountain in background here is Eyjafjallajökull, the one that erupted in 2010. We'll see pictures from there later on. Here is Hveravellir. It's a hot spring area, about 2.5 hours north of Reykjavik. Unfortunately, this has been destroyed, in my opinion, they have built wooden walkways, platforms you walk on, and you have no feeling of wilderness anymore. It's just like a tourist attraction now. Nevertheless, you can take pictures of the hot springs and the pools, and if you're lucky, you can have the mist covering the human constructions like huts and walkways. Stupid. Here's from the same place. Yeah. But back to Landmannalögar. It's an area where you have a lot of fumaroles, they're called. It's hot steam coming up from down below, and it smells like rotten eggs. It's very, very damp, and quite often it condenses on your cameras. You can't see through the lens after a while. Did I get now? Got an extra thing up there. How do I get? Just improves the picture, doesn't it? Make a good balance between this. Oh, sorry. Yeah. And in these hot springs, you find this kind of primeval brew from which one's life occurred. At least that's what I believe. You know, here's a mishmash of algae and bacteria and minerals and stuff. And flies, if you would be able to see this in 100%, zooming in, you would see a lot of flies on this slimy surface. And it's iron oxide here and cyanobacteria and stuff. Probably about 50 to 60 degrees warm. And when you see these small things, small wonders, you'll be able, you can compare this from what you see from an airplane from 400 meters. It's pretty similar things. You will see later on when I get into the aerials. And also fantastic rock formations all over. I mean, if you really like rocks, which I do, there are gorgeous rocks on Iceland. I don't know the mechanics behind this, but they have broken off into flat pieces. Another rock face. Do I go back? Yeah. This is a cliff in Reynisfjara on the south coast, and it's very, very complex basalt wall. What would you say, basalt? How do you say, basalt or basalt? Basalt, yeah. And theoretically, these should be hexagonals, because crystals, they always form like a hexagon. And one of many waterfalls, this one is called Bruarfoss. Difficult to find it. It's not no Indiana Jones adventure to get here, but it's very difficult to find it actually. But there are waterfalls in abundance in Iceland, and I used to say if you go to Iceland and you come back without one single waterfall in your camera, then you're missing a gene, right? Because I mean there are waterfalls everywhere, and many of them are they don't even have names, but they can be just as interesting as the really big tourist attractions like Skogafoss and Gullfoss. And I refuse to go to these huge waterfalls because they are crowded with tourists. I think this is one of the nicest waterfalls I've ever found. Bruarfoss. This is Hauifoss again, 122 meters high, and I rarely try to photograph the whole, the whole thing. I think photographing a whole waterfall would just be, a registration. Here I focused on the bottom part of it, which I found more interesting than the whole thing. And also I very seldom use long shutter speeds on big waterfalls because I think they're losing their feeling of power. I want to see the veils forming, you know. That's why I try to shoot it as fast as I can, just to get the veils. I'm going to show you a few pictures in black and white because I think black and white is actually what I want to do, but in order to survive on my work, I need to photograph in color. If it wasn't for that, I think I would just be shooting black and white. And this is the same waterfall. And in black and white, I can do more things without being, questioned for not being realistic. In black and white, I can play a lot more with contrast. In color, I have to, at least inside my, my frames, I don't want to make pictures that don't look realistic in terms of color. I want to be as true as possible. But in black and white, I can increase the contrast like I've done here. I can create something that really didn't exist when I saw it. This is much more, contrasted than it was in the reel. Here also a screaming sunset, which can be, made into a less romantic image in black and white. And when I photograph water coming in and out, I wait until it goes out because then it always forms around objects in the water. So you get a nicer formation or structure of the water when it's going back to the ocean than when it's coming in. Same place, Dyrolei, again, half a second exposure, which gives the water enough water blur, get a feeling of motion, but you don't lose the structure, which I think is quite important for me. Again, stretching the contrast is a basalt wall at Reynisfjara. And here I've stretched the contrast, filling out the entire histogram, so you get a really dynamic black and white image. The light was very soft here, but I increased the contrast in the post-processing. It's a gate in a cliff at Arnastapi on Snæfellsnes, north of Reykjavik. Here I've used a 35mm camera, Nikon, with a size 15 super wide angle. It's a fantastic lens, actually. I don't want to encourage people to go into ice caves because it's complete madness doing this in the summer, but I couldn't resist it. So This is in a place called Raptinusker in the highlands. And I put the 15 millimeter on my camera, put the camera on the tripod. I had one item to control, and I went into the cave and shot like crazy for 5 minutes, and I got the hell out of the place. And I survived. But it's fantastic to be inside an ice cave, but very, very dangerous. And pieces are falling down from the roof now and then. You see proofs of that here. But nevertheless, incredibly interesting place to be. Take your pictures. And this is quite a big cave. It's like a cathedral almost when you get inside there. Yeah, back to color again. This is not an aerial. It's shot from the cliff of Dyrholei, pointing towards the sunset in the west with a telephoto lens, and the waves from the Atlantic are breaking against the lava beach. But now we got getting up in a Cessna. It's Glacier's Gulls, and I'm flying very low here. Actually not flying. I'm sitting next to the pilot. He's flying, but I'm taking the pictures. And here it's really not clay pigeon shooting, but Glacier's Gull shooting. It's really quick, like this, one shot and then it's over. You go past them, and luckily it came out sharp. This is a lake called Langisjord in the highlands, one of the most beautiful lakes in Iceland. It has a fantastic scale of blue. I don't know the chemistry behind this, but I think there is some how do you say, like a sulfur, copper sulfate or something, sulfate, which is very turquoise, because I've never seen anything as blue as this lake. And there are a lot of bizarre formations to discover from the air. And this is a snowfield on Mount Hekla, one of the active volcanoes. And again, another very blue tarn, which I've flown over. Every time I've flown over the highlands, I've taken pictures of this tarn, which is in the middle of nowhere, actually. And it's amazing how it changes its character. When you fly a full 360 over this, it has completely different expression depending on the angle of light. Here is a shot from a helicopter during one of my workshops. And that's a piece of cake shooting from helicopters in comparison with a Cessna. It's much more controlled. You fly from A to B to C, etc., and you can regulate the height. You can fly really low if you want, and really compose like you do from the ground level. And this is River Jökulgil, which cuts right through Landmannalaugar. Fantastic area. And this is a picture I used to call river birth, because that's what's happening here. It's a freshwater well. It's water coming up from underneath, from very deep underneath, 500, maybe up to 1,000 meters down. And the rest of the picture is lava sand. Everything is actually sunlit here. Even the surrounding is sunlit, but it's so matte so it doesn't reflect any sunlight. But this water that is the, how to say, the component that makes it possible for life to thrive here. Many small trickles forms a creek, which gradually becomes a river. And for me, it's a place where life is starting, and it looks like an ovary. So it's kind of a metaphor for life in that respect. And the river, eventually it merges with a river called Tungna, one of the biggest rivers on Iceland. Here's another quite minimalistic aerial. If you look at the composition, it's just like a triangular shape. But if you look in the microstructures here, it's really complex. How these rivers, first of all, they merge, it's two rivers merging. It looks like almost like an X-ray of a hip joint or something. And you also have an optical illusion that it looks like the river is higher than the surroundings, doesn't it? It looks like the river is kind of convex, but of course the sand is higher than the river, but you get feeling that it's the opposite way. this river Thjorsjau on the south coast. It's an ice river carrying silt from a glacier upstream. Really interesting, I think. And here is a contributory to Thjorsjau, which has a completely different character. And here you have a volcanic soil containing iron oxide. That's why I have this red color. I've done nothing except reducing color here. I've not increased the color at all. I've desaturated this quite a bit because it's so powerful in color. In reality, it looks almost unreal. But it's extremely complex. And here is looking in the opposite direction. Here is where it merges with River Thjorsjau, and it flows over like a threshold. It looks like I've got the window, part of the window inside the frame here, but it's the threshold where this river merges with a bigger river. It's shot from helicopter during the workshop. Here is a picture I think is, when I saw Jem's drawings, the kids have made drawings of rivers yesterday. This is a picture I think has some similarities with one of the drawings. Extremely complex number of rivers, patterns of river merging together in a really crazy, complex constellation. And this is a river or delta called Skeiðarársandur on the south coast. It's 42 kilometers across. Can you believe that? A delta which is 42 kilometers across. It's almost like Ganges Delta or something. It's an incredible delta. But these are not forever. I can tell you, these are disappearing. The glaciers are retreating due to global warming, and the water supply is decreasing. And many of these rivers that I've been photographing, they don't exist anymore. So it's very difficult to go back the next year and try to improve the picture from last year. It happened to me several times that the object is just gone. And this is also Skeiðarársandur, and the flow direction is this way. Looks like fire flames, or it's a very bizarre image actually. Here is the one we have outside. It's River Fúlakvísl. It's near a glacier called Langjökull in north of Reykjavik, sort of. This river doesn't look at all like this. This was shot in '99. It's nowhere near as complex as it was back then. Oh, yeah, sorry. And here is where this river is, merging with a lake called Hvítárvatn. Here I almost threw up in an airplane because it was so bumpy. I had to abort the flight after this. I took the picture, the previous picture, and this made about 3 or 4 laps, and then I had to fly back to Reykjavik. It was dreadful flying, and you can imagine looking through a viewfinder when the airplane goes like this, and it was very, very difficult for me. And I don't have the right stomach really for aerial photography. Nevertheless, I'm trying it. It's a challenge. It's like climbing 8,000 meter peaks for me. This is a wetland glacier river area called Þjórsárver. It's a UNESCO World Heritage because it has a lot of interesting, wetlands, nesting grounds for a lot of birds. And the silty rivers are fantastic here. Unreal. And as I said, when the rivers are drying out, this is what you get. A completely dead, dry landscape, look like Sahara sort of. Life is disappearing. You see the tracks of where life once thrived, but now it's gone. Like a few others, kind of nerdy to show all these, but I'm so fascinated with the patterns and the complexity of these aerials, so I'm showing quite a lot of them. This is one of the first ones I took with a medium format camera. It's a river called Grimma on the east coast. And this is a river on the south coast on Landeja Sandur. It makes a nice arch there, and it's iron oxide in lower concentration here, carried by the river, and here you have sediments in higher concentration. That's why it's orange. Here you can see the river mouth of this river, where it's getting a salty kiss from the Atlantic. First time I flew helicopter was in 2013 during a workshop. We flew over Landmannalögar in a very special conditions. It looked like watercolor paintings because the light was really soft, subdued light, and the landscape was very how to say, patchy, because there was a lot of snow still. And on top of the snow, there was dust and ashes that had had been concentrated during the when snow is melting. You get all the dirt on the top of the snow, and that's what you see here. But it made the picture, the landscape, even more complex. It looks like pastries. You want to take a bite of this. It's like a sacher cake or something. Chocolate and vanilla ice cream. And this is one of my favorites of the aerials of the highlands. It's very abstract. For me, it's like how to say, parallel. Joe mentioned Kandinsky. This is for me a bit like Miro, a Miro painting. Shapes like this is very much like he used to do. Maybe not the colors, but the shapes. Fantastic landscape. This is Blanukur and Grena Gill Valley going up here, and here is Brennisteinsaldar. One of the shots I showed from ground level was in the lava field here, looking down towards Landmannalögar. And this, this is a side river, as a parallel river to Jökulgill. It's called Sveinsgill. And this is an extremely, colorful cliff, turquoise blue, and I have never really dared to show it in its full color, really. So I've desaturated, because people would never really understand or believe the true color of it. So if you go there, you can hike into this area, but it's kind of remote. But you will see that the color is just incredible. During this workshop, we did 3 flights, because we took 4 people at a time. I was sitting in the front with the pilot, and we had 4 people sitting in the back seat with both doors taken off. So I fly to a location, I make a broadside like this, and then I turn around the 360 so everybody can shoot the same thing. In the last flight, it was completely different conditions. It was starting to rain, and everybody in the helicopter got depressed. Oh, we're not getting the same thing as the other guys. But I think these conditions were the most sensational. Who the heck would rent a helicopter in rain and take pictures? Here I just had to do it, and I'm really happy for it, because I think the conditions here were just fantastic. Really bizarre, isn't it? And here flying out again in rain, the river Tungnau. There's still some nice colors in there. And here we get into the volcanic section. Here, Eyjafjallajökull, and underneath here you have a volcano called Katla. It's under a Myrdalsjökull glacier. Here's an extinct volcano called Mælifell. And this was shot in 2006. And here we're getting a shot from 2009. I flew really close to Mailefeld. Here was really a quick passage. Took me. I just took one shot, then I was just past this volcano. Wow, can you believe? Miracle. This is the eruption of Eyjafjallajökull in 2010. And I was doing my tax declarations when this happened. And I was stuck with paperwork. And I was so frustrated this happening in Iceland. And when I had finished this paperwork, the first eruption stopped. Because it was a lava eruption in a place called Fimmvörðuháls. And it stopped for one day. And then it started again in Eyjafjallajökull. But then the problem was that I couldn't get an airplane. I had to rebook the ticket 7 times before I managed to get over from Sweden. And then it was 14 days into the eruption. And it wasn't as powerful as it was in the beginning, but still quite amazing. And this was shot from ground level, from down below, from about 1,000 meters under the crater. And it was really, really noisy, I can tell you. And the ground was kind of shivering due to small eruptions. Small earthquakes, yeah. And before I went there, I had this kind of picture in my head. I visualized a reflection of the ash plume. So I spent the whole day trying to find a small pocket of water that could reflect it. It was quite a task, really. But eventually I found this little creek that worked. So I shot it in the evening light. Here I used an HTS adapter, which is a device you can put on the camera, a tilt and shift adapter. You can use almost all the lenses and have the movements as you have on a large format camera. So I've tilted this to get everything in focus. Now this is one of, I mentioned to Paul that this is like a commercial for Toyota, driving out of hell, right? I drove my car straight into this ash cloud, and it was really, really like going into hell. It was raining ashes from the sky, and it smelled sulfur and all kinds of dirty things. Really, really terrible place to be. And thank God I had a mask in front of my mouth, just a filter, so I didn't inhale all this, at least not the particles. But I got the gases. It was really a really terrible place. And I went to Dyrhóley. I started to take pictures, and all of a sudden I couldn't see through the camera. And I looked at the front lens. You see here is ash on the front lens. It was just covered with ash, and I had borrowed this camera from Hasselblad, like 20,000 pound worth of camera and a lens. And I thought I had destroyed the camera. It was so dirty. So I had to go back to the car and gently clean the whole thing. In the beginning, when I saw this picture, I was almost throwing it away. But now it's one of the most important images for me from the eruption, because it really shows the way it was, the conditions under which I took my pictures. And here I managed to hire an airplane and a pilot, a very, very unique guy. His name is Omar Ragnarsson. He was almost 70 years old when he took me up. He is actually Iceland's own John Cleese. He's a comedian, and he is also an environmentalist and a crazy pilot. Nobody's ever crashed an airplane as many times as he has. But he has always survived. He said, I'm taking chances. That's why I'm crashing. Well, that's what you want to hear, right? And you should see his airplane. There's almost no paint left on it. It's a 1970 Cessna 172. And on the dashboard, almost every second, almost 50% of the instruments are not there. It's empty holes in the dashboard. And some of them are fastened with tape. He didn't have any radio, so he talked to the tower in Reykjavik. Hi, it's Omar. It's special flight regulations for him, because he's the way it is. And he didn't have any intercom. He said, you can use this headset as ear protections. I could not communicate with him. So it was a body language thing, you know. We did this flight, but the flights were rock steady, absolutely rock steady. It was a piece of cake taking the pictures. It was like going on a dolly, you know, like on a rail. So it was really easy to take the pictures. I did one flight in the morning, which these are from the morning flight. And when you zoom in on these, you can see lava bombs coming out, and they're really red, glowing, big chunks of rock coming out. And this is in the afternoon, where it was completely different light conditions. And the blue is the same kind of blue as you see when you get a thunderstorm. That was the kind of distance blue you got from the ash cloud in the background. This is the last picture. It was taken after an aerial photography session. I was flying back to Reykjavik. It was very stormy, very, very stormy. And the storm lifted up a lot of dust and ashes up, dust and sand up in the sky. And it was like a sandstorm down below. And this was lit up by the setting sun outside the picture here. It looks like a view towards Mordor here. Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you. We've got time for a question and answer session. You warned us that you would go over, Hans, but you lied.
What?
You warned us that you would talk too long, but you lied.
Yeah, I was too quick, huh?
Yeah.
I took 15 images out. Should we put them back in? No?
Yeah.
Right.
So, anybody got a question for Hans?
No. I'm not well. Either I shoot buildings, that kind of stuff, or I'm not shooting. Here, I didn't want to shoot buildings. I consider myself a wilderness photographer most of the time, and that's what I want to depict. I'm not really so interested in humans. I'm how to say, what do you call those? Who's not interested in humanity? I don't even know the Swedish word now. But I'm a little bit, how to say, perverted in that respect. Yeah.
Yes, Rod.
How do you choose the orientation of your aerial photographs? Do you have that format in mind when you shoot it? Or after you've shot it, do you look through the images and rotate them all to see which is best?
So I suppose Rod's asking whether you turn it upside down because it looks better upside down than it did.
Never. I never. No, I never do any things like this. I present the pictures the way I took them. Some pictures are shot straight down. Then, of course, you could change, but I haven't done it. No.
So you never tempted to?
No.
So do you think that's a truthfulness thing? You want to keep it the way it was?
I haven't even considered the possibility, actually. Maybe I'm narrow-minded, but it has never struck me that I could rotate them or flip them or whatever. No.
This is the man to lend money to or to borrow from, I think. Honesty is the...
They all look perfectly balanced the way they are. That's why
And another thing regarding the colors, that's a key thing for me, not to do anything with the colors. I've been very, very keen on that. I've never, increased the contrast.
But you do say you desaturate.
I desaturate because it looks, I think it can look a little bit better, but I think it's a more, it's an okay thing to desaturate, but to saturate just to make nature look more beautiful than it really is something I don't do, really. I don't really fancy that.
Question up there.
Some of the rivers looked as if they're taken at a slow speed, but was there actually light being diffused by the sediment?
It's contained of silt. It looks like a long shutter speed river, right? But it's silt that gives that kind of impression. All the shots are taken at 1/800 of a second, the fastest shutter speed I can get on the Hasselblad camera.
So
in order to freeze everything, otherwise you get motion blur.
What ISO are you working on for that?
200 ISO.
Right. Okay, so quite modest, really.
Yeah. Then I generally get about f4, f5, 6 sort of. Sometimes up to 8 if I'm really lucky.
Question for the back.
Yes, you said that you rarely use a television lens, and I just wondered what your sort of thinking was behind that.
It's actually my way of seeing things. I don't see like I don't see as my landscape like a telephoto lens. It's more like what Joe described. If you're standing on a boat or something and you want to photograph things, something in the distance, of course, then I put the telephoto on. But I have a 210, the longest lens I have, and I use that. Sometimes I use it once a year, sometimes every third year. I shoot that with most of the time with a 50 millimeter or sometimes with 80 millimeter.
So you just get to the position where you get the angle
even
of view.
for intimate landscapes, I use quite often a slight wide angle equal to 35 in the DSLR in the 35 millimeter world, 50 on the Hasselblad. I like that a lot.
So what you don't want is a distortion of your perspective from your point of view. You want to portray the world as you feel you see it.
I don't know. I have no big theories behind this. It's just the way I work, really. Sometimes I'm lazy. I work with the stuff I have on my camera, and why are you walking 2 meters and put a new lens on when you can just get a little closer and use a wide angle? So, yeah.
Laziness drives everything. Another question from the back.
I notice a lot of the medium format issues are you can't get close enough to the subject unless you're tilting or something. I know you mentioned you use an adapter.
Yeah, I use it quite often.
But
I would say
the
50%.
wide angle work you showed at the beginning.
Yeah, I use it all the time.
Right, okay.
All the time, almost. Yeah. Sometimes I also do focus stacking, making 3 focusings, and I blend them in the post-processing. It's actually a quicker way of taking the picture, because you have to be really meticulous when you do the tilt. If you over tilt just the slightest, you destroy the picture. It's no forgiving. How to say? The f-stop doesn't really help you. It's stopping down to 16. It's no depth of field when you go past infinity by tilting too much. It just gets blurred immediately. So especially when it's dark, it can be very difficult to get the right tilt angle. Then I prefer to use focus stacking.
It's very hard to
and there is a fantastic software. I think you can do it in Photoshop also, but there is a software called Helicon Focus. It works very well.
Any more questions? Oh, hi.
Height were you?
Most of the
6 or
time,
5.
yeah, height. He asked me what kind of height, what kind of altitude do I take the pictures from? Normally, from airplane, I would say 300-400 meters. You're into feet, so like 1,000 feet plus 1,200-300 feet ish. And from helicopter, you can fly, take pictures from 15 meters if you want. It's fantastic, really, but it also costs a fortune. The only way I can do it is when I do the workshops. I have other people paying for it. But by being 6 people, I mean the pilot plus me plus 2 participants, the cost won't be that high because you split the cost on 4 instead of. So if you want to take helicopter shots, it's the best way of doing it actually. And the yield you get from a helicopter, you can't compare that to flying with a Cessna. Every single picture is sharp and well composed from a helicopter, whereas it's a much lower yield from a Cessna.
A question over there.
What's the hourly rate for a Cessna in Iceland?
Yeah, for a Cessna, I would say 200 pounds, sort of, ish. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite cheap on Iceland to fly. Yeah, cheaper than in Sweden. Yeah, helicopter is crazy. That's 1,600 pounds per hour. Incredible. And still I have clients. Crazy.
Any more? Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for sharing your photography with us.
Yeah,
Hans.
and thanks for inviting me. I have never in my life seen so many good photos as I've seen during these 2 days, and heard so many wise words about photography. I'm full with inspiration now. My how do you say, my RAM memory is full, and I'm trying to move it over to my hard drive, but it will take a couple of days, right?
Too much.
Okay, thanks.